You know I love my country. There's no other country better than mine. Welcome to Guyana, land of 6 races, 6 different faces, and we all live in love. Guyana is a beautiful country, no other can compare. Got everything right here, so no other can compare. Guyana is made up of so many natural resources. We don't need no forces, cause we got enough resources. Let's talk about bauxite, gold, diamond, and rice. We got it right here. Guyana ain't going nowhere. We got enough oil too. One Guyana, I love Guyana. Guyana, my country, my home. The only place I call home. One Guyana, I love Guyana. Guyana, my country, my home. The only place I call home. Hey, hey. Guyana is nice, Guyana is fun, Guyana is clean, Guyana is green, Guyana got oil, Guyana got gold, Guyana got young and Guyana got old. I ain't talking no more. Guyana got things, we growing wings and developing things. The government real and that's a big deal. I'm singing from my heart, Guyana. I love Guyana. Guyana, my country, my home. The only place I call home. One Guyana, I love Guyana. Guyana, my country, my home. The only place I call home. Welcome to Guyana, land of 6 races, 6 different faces, and we all live in love. Guyana is a beautiful country, no other can compare. Got everything right here, so no other can compare. Guyana is made up of so many natural resources. We don't need no forces, cause we got enough resources. Let's talk about bauxite, gold, diamond, and rice. We got it right here. Guyana ain't going nowhere. We got enough oil too. One Guyana, I love Guyana. Guyana, my country, my home. The only place I call home. One Guyana, I love Guyana. Guyana, my country, my home. The only place I... This is Quincy Anderson. You know I love my country. There's no other country better than mine. Welcome to Guyana, land of 6 races, 6 different faces, and we all live in love. Guyana is a beautiful country, no other can compare. Got everything right here, so no other can compare. Guyana is made up of so many natural resources. We don't need no forces, cause we got enough resources. Let's talk about bauxite, gold, diamond, and rice. We got it right here. Guyana ain't going nowhere. We got enough oil too. One Guyana, I love Guyana. Guyana, my country, my home. The only place I call home. One Guyana, I love Guyana. Guyana, my country, my home. The only place I call home. Hey, hey. Guyana is nice, Guyana is fun, Guyana is clean, Guyana is green, Guyana got oil, Guyana got gold, Guyana got young and Guyana got old. I ain't talking no more. Guyana got things, we growing wings and developing things. The government real and that's a big deal. I'm singing from my heart, Guyana. I love Guyana. Guyana, my country, my home. The only place I call home. One Guyana, I love Guyana.
The heart of our nation, where voices collide. We're breaking down the policies with truth as our guide. With clarity on the mic, bringing light to the fight. Together we're ready, shining bright. Behind the agenda, plans in our hands, exploring the progress where every voice stands. From the ground impact to the oil and gas scene, infrastructure. Let's pave the way. With fiscal responsibility, we'll seize the day. Behind the agenda, plans in our hands, exploring the progress where every voice stands. From the ground impact to the oil and gas scene, together we'll build a future strong and key. Whoa, tune in every Wednesday, feel the vibe. For the stories and insights that we all prescribe. Plans, policies, and progress we'll uncover. With every discussion, let's support one another. Behind the agenda, plans in our hands, exploring the progress where every voice stands. From the ground impact to the oil and gas scene, together we'll build a future strong and keen. To the data, the numbers don't lie. Examining the challenges, reaching for the sky. Education, infrastructure, let's pave the way. With fiscal responsibility, we'll seize the day. Behind the agenda, plans in our hands, plans in our hands, progress where every voice stands. In the progress, from the ground impact to the oil and gas scene. Together we'll build a future strong and keen. Strong and keen. Tune in every Wednesday. Feel the vitality. Stories and insights that we all prescribe. Plans, policies, and progress. Time at the end of the discussion. Let's support one another. In the heart of our nation, where voices collide, we're breaking down the policies with truth as our guide. With clarity on the mic, bringing light to the fight. Together we're ready, shining bright. Behind the agenda, plans in our hands, exploring the progress where every voice stands. From the ground impact to the oil and gas scene, together we'll build a future strong and keen. We'll dive into the data, the numbers don't lie. Examining the challenges, reaching for the sky. Education, infrastructure, let's pave the way. With fiscal responsibility, we'll seize the day. Behind the agenda, plans in our hands, exploring the progress where every voice stands. From the ground impact to the oil and gas scene, together we'll build a future strong and keen. Whoa, tune in every Wednesday, feel the vibe. For the stories and insights that we all prescribe. Plans, policies, and progress we'll uncover. With every discussion, let's support one another. Behind the agenda, plans in our hands, exploring the progress where every voice stands. From the ground impact to the oil and gas scene, together we'll build a future strong and keen. The data, the numbers don't lie. Examining the challenges, reaching for the sky. Education, infrastructure, let's pave the way. With fiscal responsibility, we'll seize the day. Behind the agenda, plans in our hands, plans in our hands, progress where every voice stands. In the progress, from the ground impact to the oil and gas scene. Together we'll build a future strong and keen. Strong and keen. Tune in every Wednesday. Feel the vitality. Stories and insights that we all prescribe. Plans, policies, and progress. Time at the end of the discussion. Let's
good evening, and welcome to episode 4 of Behind the Agenda Plans, Policy, and Progress. Really happy to have you guys here for our fourth episode where we break down or let's say we go beyond the headlines to share information with you. We have a very interesting program for you this evening. And, without further ado, let's get into it. So, again, welcome to Behind the Agenda, where we dive into deep pressing issues shaping Guyana's political, economic, and social landscape. Tonight, we will tackle a mix of topics that have dominated the recent discussions, from the Natural Resources Fund to allegations surrounding oil revenue transparency and the latest controversies within our electoral system. We begin with a bold claim by the AFC leader, Mr. Nigel Hughes, who recently asserted that US 5 billion of Guyana's oil revenue is unaccounted for. This is a serious accusation and one that we must dissect carefully. Is there any truth to this claim, or is this another example of political rhetoric aimed at creating doubt? We'll take a close look at the facts and provide you with clarity on this critical issue. Next, we'll shift our focus to the Natural Resources Fund's Investment Committee. Businessman Terence Campbell, in a recent letter to the editor, described the committee as a rubber stamp, suggesting it has no meaningful role in the immediate future. Is this an accurate characterization, or does it overlook the fundamental work of this committee and what it is tasked to do, ensuring long term stability? We'll explore the purpose of this body and unpack whether there's merit to Campbell's critique. And the attacks on GECOM's chair continue, particularly in relation to the joiner seat allocation in Parliament. We'll hear perspectives on why this issue has become the focal point for controversy and what it says about the broader state of Guyana's political discourse. In the oil and gas sector, the conversation turns to asset ownership and the persistent question raised by Kaito News about whether ExxonMobil's assets, which are paid for through cost recovery mechanisms, are truly owned by Guyana. Vice President Dr. Bart Jagdeo addressed this matter in his latest press conference, offering a simplified explanation. Tonight, we take it further, breaking down the production share agreement to demystify these claims and to provide a clearer understanding of Guyana's position in this multi billion dollar industry. Finally, if time permits, we take a broader look at the state of governance and policy implementation in Guyana as we head into the new year with growing international investment and a rapidly transforming economy. So sit back, stay tuned as we bring you insight, analysis, and perspective that go beyond the headlines and uncover the truth. Guys, join me in welcoming on screen uh, for yet another episode, Joel Bagwodin, popular financial and economic analyst here in Guyana. Joel, good evening to you and welcome to another program. You unmute.
Sorry, good evening, Cardell, and thank you for having me as usual.
Great. It's always great to have you here to, take us through the paces and give us a better understanding of what's going on. So let's look at the political economy, so to speak. At the last AFC press conference, Nigel Hughes claimed that US 5 billion of oil money is unaccounted for. In your understanding, is this a correct statement?
So thank you for that kickoff question, Cardell. Before I answer the question, I want to make an opening statement.
Mm,
And what I want to say to the viewers and to all of Guyana is that we are in a very unfortunate era in Guyana when it comes to the debates that we're having in our political arena.
mm,
What I mean by that, I'm talking about the quality of debates. The quality of debate coming from the opposition, or the quality of arguments coming from the opposition, combined, AFC, APNU, maybe to a lesser extent, AFC worse, the other parties worse, uh, is that we have to find ourselves. And when I say we, I, everybody knows I'm pro-government, and on the government side, have to always be in a position to educate
Mm,
them, even in even the debates in the National Assembly. Instead of you being excited, academic students being excited to listen to heated debates, intellectual debates, the minister gotta instead teach these guys
right.
fundamental things. So there is no debate. There's no debate, unfortunately, which is very unfortunate for us as a country. So that is my opening statement. Cardell, give me 5 seconds. Let me just turn off this TV. Just give me 5 seconds.
Sure. So as we wait for Joel to get back, that's an interesting take he shared with us there. And often I say that to myself, instead of the Guyanese having the opportunity to really get to understand the plans and policies, the ministers and the representatives have to take the time to explain things that these sitting members of
Yeah.
parliament should know. Yeah, go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, sorry about that. So it's as I was saying, you got to teach these guys. There is no opportunity as much as I personally would like to really be challenged to have some serious debates or engage in serious debates with the opposition folks. It's not forthcoming.
Right.
Now, let me address the question to demonstrate what I mean in my opening statement. Now, you notice Nigel he loves to use US dollar terms.
Hmm.
And I imagine because he's accustomed to being paid in US dollars. So, he don't deal with Guyana currency. He's paid in US dollar. He's on Exxon's payroll.
Right.
He's paid in US dollars. So that's the only term he could make reference to in US dollars. Now, 5 billion US dollars
Hmm.
is a trillion Guyanese dollars. And he made this bold statement that $5 billion that we have earned. Well, the statement came when I believe it was Exxon through their PR arm, their media uh, friends, or I think it was oil now, put out a ad or something that we've earned $5 billion, something like that. It was a PR thing that we've earned $5 billion from oil today, which is correct.
Right.
Cumulatively from since first oil to present, at least as of the latest report on the Natural Resource Fund that is available, which is for the third quarter of 2024, oil money to date is about 5.4 billion US dollars, which is just over a trillion Guyana dollars.
Right.
So the figure is correct. But is it unaccounted for? So let me explain. Let me explain. There's nothing to debate there. I have to explain it, right? The money earned from oil is deposited into the Natural Resources Fund. That fund is an account held at the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States. The withdrawals from the fund has to be done in accordance with the Natural Resources Fund Act. It has to be done through the budget process, the national budget process. It has to be pre-approved. So the budget is prepared. And if you look at 2024 budget, just about 20% of the total budget was funded by the Natural Resources Fund, which was about 240 billion Guyana dollars from the Natural Resources Fund that was approved through the budget process in the National Assembly, which
Right.
is then transferred to the Consolidated Fund. So The big debate is, or the big question, where that money went and where this $5 billion went. The total money that we earned today. Now, the
Right.
total money that we earned today, let me take it one step at a time. Of the total sum of money that we've earned to date, 60% of it remains untouched. It is sitting
Okay.
in the account. 60% of it, which is $3.2 billion US dollars,
Right.
is sitting untouched in the Natural Resource Fund
Okay.
at the Fed. So, so when you say 5 billion is unaccounted for, well, 60% of that money is untouched. It is there in the account, and it's public knowledge. It's the report is public. There is no secret,
Right.
right? There is no secret. So that's the first thing. So that means to date, we have only drawn down to finance the budget 40%, which is about 2 point something billion US dollars. 40%. Let's say 2.2 billion US dollars. Now, how are we accounting for the 2.2 billion US dollars? Where is it? To put number into perspective, if you look at the public servant wages bill alone for the
Right.
period,
Right.
it's about 2.3 billion US dollars.
Okay.
2.3 billion US dollars in wages alone. And the money that we spend from the Natural Resources Fund so far is just about 2.2 billion US dollars, just about 40%. And 60% is still in the account, untouched, earning interest in the account held at the Fed. Now, so that's step one. Step two, now let's talk about accounting for the expenditure. So let's go through the budget approval process. Now, the EFC has how many members in parliament? Help me, Cardell. They got a couple of seats, right?
Burrito, Sherrod, Ramjatan, Patterson, Beverly Alert. It's about 6 or 7 of them.
So
Eight the
they
max.
got about let's say they got about 6 or 7 seats in the National Assembly. And so far they have been participating in the budget, in the entire budget debate and approval process. You
Right.
know, there are times when they walk out the National Assembly and on certain bills and so on, they walk out. So I can't recall if they ever walk out on any budget debate and the approval. You know, after the debate, the next week, the
Cut
first week is debate, and the second week is
the
approval
estimates.
of the estimates.
Right.
So let's now account for the we spend the money yet. We have there are different two different aspects of accounting for the expenditure of the money. First, we have to approve the expenditure. And then secondly, we have to account for actually spending the money after it is approved. So let's deal with the approval. So the budget goes to Parliament. The budget is debated for the whole week, the first week of the budget, after the budget presentation. I think they get a couple of days to study the budget.
Right.
Then come and you have the budget debate, which runs for about a week. And then after the debate is concluded, they then go through the estimates. Now, the estimates of the budget, you have the budget speech and you have the estimates, which is a different document. And they are in volumes. There is volume one, volume two, volume three.
Yeah.
And all those estimates, volume one, volume two, volume three, they're all public. They're all published on the Ministry of Finance website. So anybody, as we speak, anybody could go now on the Ministry of Finance website and look for budget estimates and see you get the breakdown of every ministry, every agency, every statutory
The
body, every
line item.
constitutional body, everybody,
Yeah.
line item by line item. Now, the opposition, which comprises the AFC participates in the approval process. They go through the estimates. So
Right.
they can't say that they don't know this money, where this money went. They went through all of the estimates, all of it, line for line, line for line. Budget is approved.
Right.
After the budget is approved, the budget is now executed. You go to tender, you advertise for contracts to build a road, whatever it is, right? So there is the tendering process, the budget is executed. The money that is expended is now subject to an audit. The audit is conducted by the Auditor General's office. The Auditor General prepares a report on all of the expenditure of the country, of the state, all of the public expenditure. That report is laid over to the National Assembly. When the report is laid over to the National Assembly, or after it is laid over to the National Assembly, it then goes to the Public Accounts Committee.
Right.
The Public Accounts Committee is a committee of the National Assembly that is chaired by the opposition, of which the AFC has a seat on that Public Accounts Committee. And
I
they
think
go
they're the
through,
chair. They got a chairmanship in the
yes,
Public Accounts Committee.
yes, that's correct. They have the chairmanship of the Public Accounts Committee. The AFC sits on that committee together
Right.
with representatives from the APNU, and they go through all those reports, and sometimes they summon officers, accounting officers, etc. And that Public Accounts Committee meeting, which is held, I think, every Monday or every other or whenever it is held, it is live streamed to the so the general public could view that.
Correct.
Now that is accountability. So for you to claim that you don't know where this money went and you participated in the process of approving the monies,
Right.
forget the fact that you are not participating in terms of voting in favor of the budget. They don't usually vote in favor of the budget. I believe they abstain from voting. So the government side carries, their vote carries. The approval is based on the government side vote. But notwithstanding that, they participate in the process. They ask questions and the ministers give answers and so on, and they go through that process.
Correct.
So you participate in the process. You sit on the Public Accounts Committee after the money is expended and now have to be audited and give account for. You claiming 5 billion unaccounted, and we only spend 40% of the money, 60% still in an account. It's stupid. It's not only dishonest, it is an exposition of the profound degree of their incompetence. The profound degree of their incompetence, and they parade as intellectuals, and they know nothing. So that is the second. That's the second step. The third element in terms of explaining accountability for the expenditure that they argue. So they made reference to correctly I'm giving them credit to where they have certain things correct. That the Natural Resources Fund Act states that the withdrawal, the monies withdrawn from the NRF
Right.
are to finance national development priorities. Now, national development, and this is where they try to create confusion, which is really the confusion is premised on their profound degree of incompetence and lack of knowledge on public finance, public financial management, and public sector accounting. So the Natural Resources Fund state that The withdrawals from the NRF is to finance national development priorities and or emergency spending, whether it's climate related, whether there's a flood or you have a sea defense breakage, that type of emergency that is climate related, you know, you could go and take money from the fund. The act provides for that.
Right.
So those are the two areas in which monies are to be expended from the NRF according to the act. So now let me tell you where the origin of this notion came from. So there is a notion that because the act says the money has to be expended on national development priorities, and this is where Kaicho News get their question from. It came from a guy named Christopher Ram, Lal Bachchan Christopher Ram. So Lal Bachchan Christopher Ram
Uh-huh.
said that the money from the Natural Resource Fund has to be accounted for separately. You got to open, meaning you got to open an account separate from the consolidated fund
Uh-huh.
and put in the money, deposit the money in a separate account to finance whether the national development priority is the bridge or gas to energy or road or schools or ports, whatever it is.
Mm.
According to him, it has to be accounted for by way of separate accounts. So the money goes into a separate account outside of the consolidated fund, and you take money from there to finance the national development priorities. That is where that notion came from. But it you don't if you think of it, if we are to do that, right? And this is where I saw the question was posed to the vice president last week, and he gave an answer, and his answer was misrepresented because he was trying to simplify
Mm.
public accounting. So the media house now, Kaicho News, big front page headline: Vice President said it is difficult to account for oil money or difficult to spend the money. Something to do transparently, something. But that is not what he said. He didn't say that it is difficult to account for it. It is difficult to to itemize the spending in a way that you're putting the money in a separate account. So this is for road. We can put the money in a road account. We can put
Right.
it in a bridge account. We can put the money
Okay.
in a hospital account. We can put the money in a school account, right? But it is already itemized in the budget estimates. You
Right.
don't have to have a separate account for each line item. The accounting is done by way of the budget estimates. You have your detailed breakdown in the budget estimates. Now, if we go by that logic, now listen to the impracticality of that. So, other than oil money, we collect road taxes, we collect royalty from the gold and bauxite and diamond, we collect all sorts of different fees.
Right.
Now, the taxes we collect from road is to build roads, right? And the roads are the license fee we
Road
pay and
service
all
and
that
stuff.
road
Yeah.
service.
Yeah.
That's the roads. Now, should we say that when a road account there, all this money got to go in a road account, and that money got to go and spend on roads? Now, I'm sure if you check the amount of money that we collect from road license or road taxes, and you check to see how much money we spend on road infrastructure, it's more than the money you collect in that line.
Right.
You understand? So
Yeah.
that where the media they get confused because an accountant who's supposed to know better, he confused the hell out of everybody that you must have a separate account for this for all these line items. No,
You think these things are deliberate though?
I think some are deliberate and some is just a demonstration of their stupidity, right?
Right.
So the accounting of the money is by way of the budget estimates. Now, then they say, so what are the national development priorities? We don't know what are the national development priorities. Really? We don't know what are the national development priorities. The national development priorities, and look how easy, let me show you how easy it is. The national development priorities are infrastructure, infrastructure in roads, sea defense, bridges. That's one. Two, education, education infrastructure, building schools, etc. Three, health sector, building the 5 new hospitals, modern hospitals, etc. Those are gas to energy priority. So gas to energy is financed by the loan, cost oil and the loan. The loan isn't approved as yet. So money from the budget went to finance the gas to energy so that the project is not stalled up. So we meet our deadline.
Right.
So that is one development priority that you could go and match from the budget estimate. Say, okay, so we draw down $236 billion. The withdrawal from the Natural Resource Fund in 2024 is 240 billion. The infrastructure budget alone, which is national development priority, which is on the capital side of the budget, is 236 billion. And there you have it. So the oil money went to finance infrastructure. We took 240 billion from the fund. So 240 billion has to be expended on infrastructure, on health sector infrastructure, hospitals, on school infrastructures,
Right.
education sector, and housing. That is another big development priority. Housing development. The infrastructure budget alone is $236 billion. All the oil money done there. That's where the oil money is. And it is itemized. You could go in the budget estimates and see how many roads we build, how many is in rehabilitation, how much bridges we build in, how much sea defense, how much meters of sea defense, 300,000 meters of sea defense. You could go in the housing sector and see that, but infrastructure alone eat up the money. And so that is the accounting. You don't have to itemize by way of having a separate account outside of the consolidated fund. Because if you do that, now they're talking about transparency. Now, if you open an account to put the money outside from the natural resource fund to an account outside of the consolidated fund, any account outside of the consolidated fund is outside of the scrutiny of the National Assembly.
Right.
And that is what when the former finance minister did. The former finance minister overdrawn government deposit accounts that have liquid cash in it, over $60 billion they inherited. Overdrawn those accounts, run it up to about 140 billion. Now the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act, which is the financial law that governs public expenditure and fiscal management of the country. That law states that if you overdraw, if you run an account, a government deposit account in overdraft, meaning you take the balance from plus to negative, you have to repay because that is effectively a form of debt that you've created.
Right.
So you have to repay that money by the end of the year, clear it off. He has never done that. So he's violated the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act. And secondly, by so doing, he has circumvented the scrutiny and the approval of the National Assembly, because that is why the money have to go into the consolidated fund, because the government cannot go and withdraw money from the consolidated fund or the contingency fund, which is a sub fund of the consolidated fund,
Mm.
without the scrutiny and approval of the National Assembly. So, while on one hand, the critics are saying that we should have separate accounts outside of that, and still they're advocating lack of transparency and accountability, when I'm demonstrating to you that there is the highest degree of transparency and accountability, what they are in effect proposing is a lack of transparency, is a lack of accountability to put it in an account outside of the consolidated fund.
Right, right,
So
right.
that tells me that you don't know the law of the country. You don't know the fiscal law and how
Yeah,
it is operated.
right. No, Joel, I want to bring your attention to this letter by Terence Campbell, and a letter to the editor on the NRF Investment Committee. Now, he asserts that the Investment Committee is a rubber stamp, and there's no work for that committee to do for a good number of years. Now, can you explain to me and the viewing public, because I am not too versed on these topics, what is the function of the investment committee and whether there is any merit to this position that has been taken by Campbell?
So when the government, first you had the Natural Resources Fund Act that was passed in the National Assembly by the ACNUFC
Right,
when they were deemed to be a caretaker government after the no confidence motion. Now, according to our constitution, once there is a no confidence motion that was successfully carried, which was the case in our case, that government becomes a caretaker government, which means that you have to make preparation to go to an election 3 months thereafter.
right,
And that in caretaker mode, you can't do anything substantial. You can't pass any bills, debate any bills, pass any law, or spend on the capital budget. You just run the government ordinarily, routine things, right? Pay bills, pay wages. So that's all you do. Nothing substantive. They violated that and went to the National Assembly and passed, as if nothing happened, the Natural Resources Fund Act.
right,
Now, their version of the Natural Resources Fund Act, they had this bloated accountability committee, which was a sham, just to show that you have a lot of people on it. But it was really it was really intended to create confusion and chaos. When you think about it, how it will work in reality.
right,
They had an investment committee as well. Their withdrawal formula was very complicated. The withdrawal formula that they came up with was very complicated. No one understood the formula. Only the minister knows the formula, the Minister of Finance. And, and he had the committee had to advise him how much to withdraw. But regardless of that advice, he don't have to listen to the advice. The act that they created allows him to disregard the advice and he alone decides how much money to withdraw from the fund. So much for transparency. And you can go and compare it, right? I'm sure
right,
the original act, which is now repealed, is still on the internet. And there was no board of directors. The PPPC said, listen, we're going to change the act. We will make it more enhance accountability and transparency and more in line with international best practices. So there is a standard called the Santiago Principles. The Santiago Principles is a set of guidelines that sets the international benchmark for sovereign wealth funds in terms of governance structure, institutional structure, accountability framework, and transparency. Now, if you go and you look at those principles and you looked at you look at our act as it currently stands, you would see that it is largely in compliance with those principles from an accountability standpoint, from a transparency standpoint, from a governance standpoint, and
Right.
from institutional standpoint. There is a board of directors, there is an accountability committee, and there is an investment committee. Now that I explained that, so what is the role and function of the investment committee? Oh, by the way, the withdrawal rules, unlike Winston Jordan's complicated formula, a grade one student can apply the formula. Very simple formula, withdrawal formula. Very simple, transparent. Nobody ain't got to be confused, and you don't have to be a mathematics genius or an accountant to apply that formula. It's very simple.
Right.
So, coming now to the investment committee, if you read the provisions of the Act, the withdrawal from the Act is that function resides exclusively with the National Assembly, resides exclusively with the National Assembly and the Minister of Finance or the Ministry of, or let's say the executive, let me put it this way, resides exclusively with the executive to apply the formula and do their reporting and so on in accordance with the Act and do their calculations. So the executive has a function, then take the budget to the National Assembly, and the National Assembly approves. So the investment committee has no jurisdiction over the withdrawal. So that function resides exclusively with the executive and the National Assembly in terms of the approval of the withdrawal and the expenditure. The function of the investment committee is to prepare the investment mandate of the fund for the
Okay.
balance that remains in the fund, not the
Okay.
sum withdrawn, the sum that remains, the balance that remains. So remember, in the first question about the $5 billion that Nigel, you said that is unaccounted for, we've established that that is inaccurate, that 60% of that money remains in the fund. So the investment committee has no jurisdiction over the 2.2 billion that has been withdrawn from the fund to finance the budget. What they have responsibility for is the
60%.
balance of the
Right.
$3 billion that is in the fund. So that's the first thing. The second thing is now, what is the investment mandate? The act of itself, the Natural Resource Fund Act, prescribes or defines rather the parameters of the investment mandate. So, although the investment committee has a responsibility to advise the board of directors on the investment mandate, they have to provide that advice within the framework of the parameters set in the Act. And what the Act says is that the investment mandate of the fund is one that is passive. So in financial markets, right, and investment analysts would know this, you have two different types or two different posture of in or approaches to investment rather. Two different
Okay.
approaches. You have the passive approach and you have the active approach or a more aggressive approach. So what is the difference between the two? Now, a passive investment mandate simply means that the funds are to be invested only in low risk instruments or low risk assets, financial assets, that is. An active investment portfolio is one where, like a hedge fund or a mutual fund, those are more active portfolio. They're actively investing, trading in stocks or trading in secondary markets, global markets, regional markets, bonds and stocks and treasury bills actively, right? And also riskier assets. Now, the Norway Sovereign Wealth Fund in 2023 reported a historic loss of 164 billion US.
Wow.
They have the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, over 1 trillion US dollars, and they suffered a loss of 164 billion US dollars. And that is because Norway is an advanced country, they advanced economy. They set up their sovereign wealth fund 20 years after they would have discovered oil and started to produce oil. 20 years after, we set
Right.
up a sovereign wealth fund at the very beginning, at the very inception of forced oil. And Norway has that fund. They're a wealthy country. So they can afford they are at a stage in their development that they can afford to now invest in a more diversified portfolio, a more active portfolio. So, and this is what Terence is saying, that because we have he didn't say it explicitly, but this is what he means, that because we have a passive investment, it's not an active investment mandate, then there is no work for the investment committee. But I beg to differ, because not because you have a passive investment mandate, meaning, so the fund right now, the money is invested in, is right in the deposit account, earning interest at the Fed,
Right.
right? Now they could also decide to invest in US Treasury bills, which would also be passive. US Treasury bill is considered a low risk asset, financial asset. But if you, let's say we want to go and buy a Trinidad government treasury bill, I would not say that is a low risk asset at this point in time. Trinidad is in some fiscal problems. And if, for example, the investment committee said, look, Trinidad government need $1 billion. They need $1 billion to finance their budget. And they're selling $1 billion in treasury bills. Let's buy it. If I'm on that investment committee, I'd say no.
Right.
Trinidad is high risk right now because they might default soon. So why would I finance Trinidad debt? And I know that they can't pay. They're going to default at some point in time. Yes, so I'm giving you practical
Yeah, I
example,
get you. I get you.
right? So even a passive investment mandate, you still have to, as an investment committee, you still have work to do. You still have to monitor these markets. You still have to read every day. Every day you got to read financial news. Every day you got to read what's happening on Wall Street. You got to know when the Fed says, when the head for the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank says we're cutting interest rate by 2 basis points or 5 basis points. What are the implications of that? What does that mean for our fund? Right? So there is work. I don't understand what he means. There is no work. There is work, even if you have a passive investment mandate. You still have to monitor the markets. You still have to read every day, keep abreast, and do your analysis.
Right.
But you're not doing that. So the other important point I want to make on the issue of the investment committee is that what I want to explain or break it, or to break down for the viewers to understand, is that we are maybe 60 years behind development. We're 60 years behind development. The United States is 300 years ahead of us in terms of development, right? All the advanced countries are hundreds of years ahead of us, even except for countries maybe like Dubai and Singapore that are 60 years ahead of us,
Right.
right? Dubai is about 50 years ahead of us. Singapore is about 60 years ahead of us. We're 60 years behind. America is 300 years ahead of us. Now, with that in mind, you want us to take our natural resources fund money and take it, and essentially what it means, financial assets investing, if you're to have an active portfolio and to go and invest in financial markets in government bonds or treasury bills, other government bonds and treasury bills, or corporate bonds, what you're essentially doing is you're essentially financing other government spending. If we buy US treasury bills, what that means is we are financing the US government budget. To do what? To do the same thing that we need here, to build road, to build hospital, to build bridges, to pay social welfare. Whether we buy Trinidad treasury bills, same thing, financing Trinidad government budget. If we buy a corporate bond, it means you're financing a corporate bond is a
Company
private,
budget.
if it's a private company, you're
Right.
financing a private company.
Yeah.
So why should we go and finance another country, their healthcare, their education, their roads and bridges? And we need ports, we need bridges, we need roads.
Exactly.
It's a sensible thing to do. You understand? So
Right.
this is what they are not explaining to people, but I have a responsibility to explain to people to understand that
Right.
it's
Right.
essentially when you talk about this invest, oh, the fund should be invested in on the stock market and we should buy stocks. No, we still have build out our country. We still have to diversify our economy away from oil
Right.
and gas. Are we going to
Yeah.
spend? We going to build out a people country that's already rich, by the way.
Exactly. Exactly. No, Joel, I want to bring you over to the election scene. I saw you weigh in on the attacks on the GECOM chair over the joiners seated in National Assembly. Now, for the viewers here and those who will look back at the program a little later, can you expound on your views in relation to this matter?
So yes, so I saw Anog and the AFC. They came out and they attacked the GCOM chair, and particularly the attacks were intensified when the legal officer of or the legal counselor or whatever is the correct title
Right.
of GCOM at a press conference says that GCOM erred in relation to the the joined seat with the TNM candidate. Now, and you saw the piece I wrote. So let me simplify my position without getting too technical because it's a lot of legal stuff and I'm not an attorney. But the thing with our laws and our constitution, it's written in very simple language, simple English, right? It's not written in complicated English, Queen's English of yesteryear or BC English that is complicated and we can't understand. It's written in simple English,
Right. Right.
right? So I read the ROPA, the
Representation of People's Act.
Representation of the People's Act, the relevant section. And my interpretation of the act, I was pleasantly surprised to see that somebody shared with me an alternative legal interpretation from some legal opinion from some attorneys, a group of lawyers. And I saw the opinion was shared with me and I read it. And the interpretation that they came up with was consistent with my interpretation. Now, what was my interpretation? And so let me take cover from the legal opinion because I don't have authority in this space, but I'm taking cover from a legal opinion that I've seen or have been privy to. The ROPA Act, the ROPA states when you have a joinder. Now the Act provides for parties to do this joinder formula. What the Act doesn't provide for is the private arrangement vis-a-vis the MOU.
Oh,
The Act doesn't provide for that, but it provides for a joinder list. And it specifies how a joinder list is to be treated. Now, the joinder list, in this case, you have three parties, TNM, LJP, and ANU.
Anog, right,
LJP got the highest number of votes. ANU got the second highest number of votes, and TNM third. They had their own, they work out their own arrangement and their own formula. But when it goes to GECOM, GECOM has to apply the act and what the act
right.
says. Now, the act says, according to my interpretation and consistent with a legal opinion of a group of lawyers, is that the joinder list is treated as one list.
Okay,
So if it's so ordinarily, forget about the joinder, the PPP and take the big parties, the APNU and so on. Only a member of parliament can only be removed either in few ways. They could either resign voluntarily or the the head of the list. In APNU's case, the head of the list is David Granger. In the PPP case, the head of the list is, I'm not sure if it's the president or the GS. I'm not sure who's the head. But whoever is the head of the list, that person could recall a member of parliament. And this is where the confusion lies with this joinder list. So they're claiming that the head of TNM list wrote to GCOM or wrote to the National Assembly to recall the TNM candidate. But the TNM candidate, how you treat him, if it's one list can get three head,
right. So the
right?
wrong person do the
One
writing there.
list. So what they did, so what I found out is that when when they nominated LJP first occupy the seat, all three parties signed on to that.
Oh,
That was deemed to be properly and correctly approved in accordance with the law, the ROPA, and so that person was made a member of parliament by following that procedure. All three parties, not a single person. They'll join the list is treated as one list. Therefore, it either means that the joint list has to have
leader,
one head,
right,
or if it is a case where all three parties signed off approving that person, and in this case, this is what they did. All three parties signed off. The same thing for the current for this girl Asha, Dr. Kisun. All three parties signed off on her appointment or whatever is the term you call it, nomination to the National Assembly, whatever it is.
right.
All three. So that is treated as one list. To remove her one man sign, which is a deviation from the precedent. One person can't sign. You got to get all three person for sign.
I get what you're saying now. The
It's
same
a simple
process that
thing.
get you there, got remove you from there. You gotta have
Exactly.
all
Yeah,
three.
so it's a sim so in conclusion, the legal the legal counsel for GCOM, he erred. His interpretation was incorrect. And I'm saying this based on my interpretation, layman's interpretation, and a group of lawyers, they opine, they're of the view that he was incorrect. Now that could be tested in court. That's a
Right.
different matter,
No,
right?
but wait, before you
But here's
continue.
another important point I want to make,
Uh-huh.
Cordell, for the viewers. Because there was this confusion, the opposition, and imagine Nigel Hughes, who's a seasoned attorney, but of course he's operating as a politician, so understandably so, he ran away, or they created this impression as though the opinion of the legal officer is the opinion of the commission, GCOM, and that is not so. The commission, which constitutes the chairman and the commissioners, that is one one part of the institutional structure. The other part of that institutional structure is GECOM, the secretariat, which is headed by a CEO, and the legal officer is a staff of the secretariat who
Right.
advises the commission. So what the way it works and the way any organization operates, you have a legal officer in-house. The legal officer provides an opinion on a matter. The opinion is not automatically accepted. It has to go through a process of deliberation. It has to go it has to go to the commission. It has to be deliberated at the level of the commission, and based on those deliberations, the commission would then decide whether they accept the opinion or they reject the opinion. This is what I wanted to explain clearly, the distinction. So the legal officer could have whatever opinion he wants. That should not be construed to be the views or the position of GCOM. It has to go through the levels of deliberation and
So,
approval.
so that's what I wanted to ask you. Is it normal for a legal officer to make uh, an opinion of this sort public? Isn't that, as you said, this is something you're supposed to share with the secretariat and
Uh,
deliberate over it before a statement is made on what stands GCOM, and not the legal officer takes on the issue?
it depends on the, the codes of conduct of the organization. If the organization has a code of conduct that prohibits an officer to give an opinion publicly or to speak publicly on behalf of the commission,
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure if GCOM has that, but I'm just giving you a general answer.
Right.
He can't. Now, let's take the Public Procurement Commission, for example, where I sit as a commission. We have codes of conduct. We sign oaths and so on. We were sworn in, and then we sign on to what you call these. What do you call it? I,
Non-disclosure.
non-disclosure, man. We take oaths. I can't remember the correct terminology, the full terminology we call it, but an attorney comes and you sign this oath and you take an oath of
Oath of office or
confidentiality
something
or
like that.
something, right? Well, it has
Uh,
to do with confidentiality.
right.
Now, and in our code of ethics, the only person who can speak for and on behalf of the commission is the chairperson. No other officer. When I speak, if I speak publicly on the work of the Public Procurement Commission, I'm speaking in my own capacity and I'm speaking on things that are in the public domain.
Right.
I can't speak on things that have not yet surfaced in the public domain. So that's how it works. I don't know if GCOM has that kind of code of ethics. If they don't, whether it's normal and acceptable, yes, it's a legal officer could have any opinion, they could say anything, but people have to understand, and this is why it is important to have codes of conduct. Because while it is good to have that kind of liberal way of operating, especially legal attorneys and legal officers,
You could cause trouble.
um, it creates
Yeah.
confusion, it creates unnecessary confusion.
So take for instance, this is litigated, and we get to the point where the legal officer is actually incorrect. He
But he
creates a
will look
whole
stupid
problem.
as well. He looks stupid.
Oh my. Well, we out of time. We had a lot more things to discuss this evening, but we're out of time today. I'd like to thank you for being here with us to break down these very important topics to help Guyanese at home and abroad get a better understanding of what's happening here on the ground. We'll be back here with you guys on the 18th, no, the 25th. Actually,
Actually,
no,
no.
well, the 4th of
No.
January.
So because of that, Cardell, maybe we should do another one next week because I wanted to touch on the salary increase and I want to talk about that too.
Okay.
Maybe we should do another one next week and we close off for the year and come back in January.
All right, great. So, guys, we'll be back on the 18th of December. That's next week, Wednesday. There'll be a rebroadcast of this episode on Sunday evening. So if you missed it and you'd like to see it again, you could always check my page, Joel's Livewire TV, or you could catch the rebroadcast on Sunday from 7:30 to 8. Right, and we'll probably stick another rebroadcast in there in between as well. Joel, thank you for being here with us. Thank you for all the viewers for tuning in. I see Pam is telling me Trevor is tuned in on the program. Good night to Richard and Natasha and all those tuned in. Thank you for the continued support here on Behind the Agenda. That's all the time we have for today or this evening. Take care until next time. I'm Cordell Jones saying bye for now.
In the heart of our nation, where voices collide, we're breaking down the policies with truth as our guide. With clarity on the mic, bringing light to the fight. Together we're ready, shining bright. Behind the agenda, plans in our hands, exploring the progress where every voice stands. From the ground impact to the oil and gas scene, together we'll build a future strong and keen. We'll dive into the data, the numbers don't lie, examining the challenges, reaching for the sky. Education, infrastructure, let's pay